Hey, and welcome back to Sociology. Today we're going to talk about hegemonic masculinity, gender inequality in the labor force, as well as consequences of gender inequality and gender violence. So first, I bet you're wondering, what is hegemonic masculinity, or androcentrism? So androcentrism is where you center the andro, or the male body, and everyone else is then measured or identified away from that, right? So if I have a male identified body, then I would then measure a female identified body as less than or other. When we think about concepts of oppression and the matrix of domination, we can see that within this matrix, the andro is centered, thus the andro has the most power. Within hegemonic masculinity, if we go back to hegemonic or hegemony, which is right, this idea that the dominant power elicits, large quotations, voluntary consent from the large masses because of whatever, right? So if hegemonic masculinity is dominant powers eliciting consent, voluntary or involuntary, about what we come to know as masculinity. So concept popularized by R.W. Connell of proposed practices that promote the dominant social position of men and the subordinate social position of women. So we see this as a cyclical relationship, right? So hegemonic masculinity feeds into gendered socialization, which we talked about last time, which feeds into power inequality, which we've been talking about this entire semester, which then feeds into social and health inequality, which we've also been talking about this semester. And then the social reproduction of patriarchy, right? So patriarchy is the domination of other genders by the male body. Does that make sense? And so then that leads to patriarchal society and then back to hegemonic masculinity. So we see that all of these things reinforce each other. So let's think about some gender identity. Now you should have, or you're going to watch a couple videos in regards to gender identity, but gender identity again is how we identify as male, female, third gender, transgender, two-spirit, twin spirit, agender, whatever, right? So revisiting this idea that we have a dichotomy of gender in America, right? So that in our dominant realities, we find that we reinforce this idea that we have only male and female genders, but from the ABCs of gender, or got gender queries, we've identified that there are so many other people who don't identify with the male or female body. We also have gender dysphoria. So within gender dysphoria, we see that this is when the gender that you are assigned at birth to the gender that you are associate with today has had some conflict and created cognitive dissonance or some sort of wounding within your lifetime. We also see that this dichotomy of gender and hegemonic masculinity and patriarchy leads to gender discrimination for unequal access to resources, unequal treatment, unequal valuing, and then exploitation and cultural genocide. Within this gender dysphoria, we have started to see a movement with Germany and within Canada where they've started to take off the only two male and female, or the gender dichotomy, and are allowing either you to write in or allowing a third gender or non-identified gender on government forms such as birth certificates, which is a really exciting step forward. So let's start to problematize this binary of gender, right? So we can see that what people assume gender is female, male, that's it. What gender actually is more like a web of thread or a cosmos construction, right? So really, when you think about gender, gender is a personal performance, right? So when we think about how society socializes us into gender, we need to start continually understanding that we police it because we feel that we have ownership of others' bodies. But in reality, we need to only police our own gender, right? So saying things like, but what is your real gender? But I see you as, or that's not a girl, boy, transgender, third gender, it's a this, or you can't wear that, it's for girls, boys, whomever, right? So you have no right to tell someone who they are, what their body is, and how they should dress, or how they should feel or react. Does that make sense? So really, wear whatever makes you feel comfortable, and then allow and support other people to have agency and ownership of their own bodies. Their bodies are not for our consumption. And gender is such a multiple and fluid thing that really we have no investment, or we have no position that we can judge other people. It is a really great practice to, when you introduce yourself to someone, to identify your own pronouns. In example, hi, my name is Jay. I go by she, her, hers, or they, them, their, right? With people who are really into traditional, dominant, oppressive grammar, find that they might have trouble with this, but in reality, it's the same thing. Why do you need to police how other people speak or view or act or behave, right? You can't, and you shouldn't. So, with gender being fluid, that means that sometimes people identify as a girl, a boy, neither, both, all, something completely different, right? So within that, we need to understand this theory of essentialism. So the theory of essentialism is the view that gender is a fixed biological or physiological state that does not vary among individuals or over time. This is 100% not true, right? Because gender, again, is an expression. So one day if I want to present like a third gender body, or if I want to present like an agender body, or if I want to present like a male identified body with female identified attributes, whatever. I can do whatever I want because it's my body, and other people can do whatever they want because it's their body. When you start thinking about why you are having issues with this, or if you're starting to feel some sort of physical or visceral reaction, I want you to go back to that mindfulness video and think about why you might be feeling that way. Why is it that I'm having a reaction to allowing another human to exist in the way that they would like to exist, right? So let's look at the lower the lower left-hand corner. It says, I am gender fluid. That means sometimes I'm a boy, and sometimes I'm a girl, and sometimes I'm in between. But all the time I am human, right? So when we see things like, or when children ask things like, oh, mommy, is that a boy or girl? Or daddy, is that a boy or girl? We can respond with, that is a human, or that's a person, and they get to decide that, right? So with essentialism, gender is not male or female. Gender is a spectrum. Spectrum implies a linear progression. Really, it's more like a nebulous or a cosmic or a ball of yarn. Essentialism identifies that gender is defined by body parts. Gender is a range of expression. Essentialism identifies that gender is determined by chromosomes. Not true. Gender is how you relate to yourself. Gender is associated with sexual orientation in essentialism. Not true. Gender is a personal identity. Remember, there's a difference between sex, gender, and sexuality. Sex are your sex organs. Sexuality is who you are attracted to or not. And gender is your performance in a range of expression. So let's go back to some sociological theories on gender. Functionalism, socialization into roles, is a major impetus behind inequality. So socialization of gender functions to provide inequality, but socialization of gender also functions to continue to keep our unequal society stable. Conflict theories, women are disadvantaged by inequalities built into the social structure. And symbolic interaction theory is gender is produced through interaction and interpretations. So we can see how all of these foundational theories are present in our current construction of our world. They are foundational theories, we have built upon them, and it doesn't mean that you have to choose one over the other. Okay, so then the historical lineage of feminism, right? So if you haven't noticed by now, you probably have, but may have not meant to say anything, I spell women with a Y, right? So let's think about all the different ways that we can spell women, right? W-O-M-E-N, W-I-M-M-I-N, W-O-M-I-N, W-O-M-Y-N, which is me, what I choose to spell women, right? So we can think about this idea that why we are spelling women differently. A large part of it is to include all women, even women who do not fit into this gender binary that our dominant culture has constructed. So when we start moving away from this androcentric or male-centered term of whoa men, right? So we are not a byproduct of men, but rather that we are a collection of a community of humans that define ourselves, right? That also look at the intersectionalities of all of those socially constructed systems and how they influence what we come to know as gender, right? So Indigenous women have a very different experience than white women. Black women have a different experience than Latina women. Latinx women have a different experience than Latina women. We have so many different types of women. Trans women have a different experience than cisgendered women. If you are unfamiliar with cisgender is the gender that I was born with, is the same gender that I identify with today, and I've never had any gender dysphoria. You should have watched this in the Gender ABCs video or Got Queries video, but I'm reinforcing it for you here now. So I want us to look at all the different types of the women's movement and really how the socially constructed systems like race, class, and sexual orientation have influenced a hierarchy or an internalized oppression within the women's movement, because we can definitely identify that the first and second wave women's movement, and often much of the third wave women's movement, is centered around the privileges of white women.